Today we've got something that might be one of the most important programs we've ever done, and it's one that's kind of under the radar, but it's something that you probably will only hear on the 700 Club. So listen very carefully, maybe get your friends to tune in because it's dynamite. Well, Islamists made a strong showing in Tunisia's election, and Libya's new leader is talking about Islamic law. That's why some say Islam, not democracy, is dominating the so-called Arab Spring.
And it's fueling talk about the possible restoration of what's known as the Islamic Caliphate. Chris Mitchell has more.
When Muhammad died 14 centuries ago, the Muslim world needed someone to take the Prophet's place.
The Caliphate was the leadership of Islam after the death of Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam.
The last caliphate was located here in Istanbul, Turkey. For 400 years, Istanbul and the Topkapi Palace behind me was the political center of the Muslim world. From here, the Turkish sultans ruled the Ottoman Empire as caliphs from 1517 until the empire fell after World War I. But in 1924, the Turkish leader Ataturk abolished the caliphate. Since then, many Muslims dreamed of its return.
The major aim of the Caliphate is to rule the world, and this can be done under the leadership of one caliph who he himself only can declare a holy war, a jihad.
Some believe a restored caliphate will precede the Islamic Messiah. While they may disagree on tactics, many modern Islamic groups share the goal of restoring the caliphate. They include the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah Tahrir, and the granddaddy of them all, the Muslim Brotherhood.
The Muslim Brotherhood was set up in 1928, 4 years after the disbanding of the Muslim Caliphate by Ataturk, and their specific mission was to reestablish the Caliphate, just 4 years later. And they've been pursuing that mission ever since. Their goal remains to set up one world Islamic government.
The Brotherhood now has a foothold in Egypt, where after the fall of the Mubarak government, it became the country's most organized political party.
What the Muslim Brotherhood would like to see is a strong, powerful Islamic world government armed with nuclear weapons, whether those are provided by Pakistan or Iran, doesn't matter. And they would be gradually eliminating Christian and Jewish influence, Christian and Jewish governments.
Another potential power player who wants to restore the caliphate is Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan.
I think Erdogan clearly sees himself as the founder of the new caliphate, the world Islamic government, with Turkey at its center. I think this is what's behind him offering to send the Turkish Navy, for example, to protect a, quote, peace flotilla that would come to Gaza.
I'm sure that in his heart he's dreaming about the re-establishment of the caliphate. Yeah. He behaves like it. I mean, he can easily push this area into a great war.
The threat of war and rise of Islam lead many to say the so-called Arab Spring is a misnomer.
I wouldn't call it an Arab Spring. It's far from being an Arab Spring. It's the same kind of winter.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Istanbul, Turkey.
It's dynamite, and ladies and gentlemen, mark that as you read the news and you see the Obama administration saying there's nothing wrong with the Muslim Brotherhood, Hillary Clinton saying that the Muslim Brotherhood is a moderate group. Nonsense. It has one goal, and that's to reestablish the caliphate, to reestablish Muslim domination around the world. And, of course, if you look at the Iranian view of it, is to prepare the world for the emergence of the 12th Imam, the so-called Mahdi, who will come after a period of chaos when the world is in shatters, and then he'll bring about peace, and according to their belief, Jesus Christ will come along and say, you know, you're the man, and I'm just going to be here to help you. I mean, it's just absolutely monstrous, and it is the Antichrist. I mean, that's what we're looking at. I mean, it's coming about, and we're not being alarmist and extremists because this is what they say. Listen to the words that these people say, especially what they say in Arabic, and we'll try to get it translated for you as the months go by. But that's the game plan. Just watch it when you read your headlines. What happens in Tunisia? What happens in Egypt? What happens in Syria? Syria, what happens in Iran, what's going to be happening in Iraq as soon as we pull out, what happens in Pakistan. And you read what Karzai said in Afghanistan. He said if it came down to a showdown between the United States and Pakistan, he would put Afghanistan on the side of Pakistan against the United States. Now, that's what we're facing. Okay, well, so much for the alarmists, but it's not over yet. Lee Webb has the rest of our top stories from the CBN Newsroom. Lee?
Pat, European leaders have clinched a deal now to bail out Greece and salvage the European Union. They hope it will mark a turning point in their two-year debt crisis. The strategy includes a significant reduction of Greece's debts, shoring up Europe's banks, and adding money to a bailout fund. One goal of that fund is to keep larger economies like Italy and Spain from getting dragged down further. The euro surged on the news, and some here in the U.S. are breathing a sigh of relief as well. The U.S. economy is tied closely to Europe's financial situation, but experts say the plan's effectiveness will depend on carrying out some tough measures. For example, to achieve the reduction, Greece's private creditors will be asked to accept 50% losses on the bonds they hold. Pat, what do you think about this deal?
It's a type of bankruptcy. They're going to acknowledge that Greece is in default, and so if you hold a bad bond and your debtor is in default, well, you get a haircut. I mean, you might lose everything. You might, if they only lose 50%, that'll be not too bad. So what the Europeans are saying is we're going to come in and supply the capital, or else permit banks to operate with diminished capital, and the bailout fund is 1 trillion euros, which will come out to about $1.4 billion, which would be a pretty substantial backdrop for the countries. But it looks like Italy's going to trouble. Berlusconi's in trouble. He's getting ready to call for a new election. His government might fall, and that could bring about chaos. Spain and Portugal are still in bad shape. But what the Europeans are afraid of is a domino effect that Greece goes down. But they were thinking the Greece debt could go as high as 180% of GDP. Now they say we want to get it down to 120% of GDP, which is still way, way too high. Lee?
Anti-Wall Street protesters have been clashing with police across the country. Showdowns are now expected in cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles. Protesters in Oakland held a late-night vigil a day after an Iraq war veteran was critically injured in a crackdown there. More than 50 protesters were arrested in Atlanta. That happened after a man was seen in the camp with an AK-47 assault rifle. Garbage is piling up at these protest sites. Officials are expressing concern over hygiene and even rat infestations. The anti-Wall Street movement began over anger with corporate power, but now an ironic twist in Portland, where protesters are trying to become the very thing they're protesting. Occupy Portland has filed paperwork to become a corporation. A new documentary on human trafficking shows it's a more serious problem inside the U.S. than most people realize. The movie, called Sex and Money, is produced by young Christian filmmakers. And as Heather Sells reports, it shows how pornography often fuels modern-day trafficking.
The goal behind Sex and Money is to let everyday Americans know that trafficking exists in their everyday world, and it targets their young daughters.
I thought I was the only 12-year-old. I was told to lie and say that I was 16 years old.
And this man, he took me, I was 14 years old, and he took me from here to California.
They're supposed to be, at this age, in a loving, comforting home environment where they can grow and explore, and instead they're exploring and learning in the dangerous, with pimps and johns, and in dangerous places where they're raped and abused.
Filmmakers covered the country from cities and suburbs to rural areas. They talked with experts, former pimps who sold their victims to whoever would buy, and the men who bought, including this pastor. He purchased his first sex act on the way to church.
I was on my way to lead a candlelight service on Christmas Eve.
Now the group is on the road again, setting up venues in churches and on college campuses to screen Sex and Money.
When people watch this film, they get really upset about the issue, and with education, a lot of times comes motivation to do something.
Perry says it led one physician to train other doctors how to spot victims, and a flight attendant began an awareness campaign for her peers. The production has also opened new conversations and ministry times in churches where they've shown it.
I've had women come up to me, like countless people, being like, I have been raped, I've been sexually abused, I've been addicted to pornography and masturbation for X amount of years, and just really realizing this is such a reality and how much guilt and shame people are carrying for what's been done to them.
This experience has also impacted the producers themselves. When their research showed that different media often drives a person to buy sex, they realized the need to catch the attention of this iPod-driven generation.
I think our generation has a choice with whether we are going to be contributing to the problem or whether we're going to be doing something positive to help the situation.
Heather Sells, CBN News.
And again, the film is called Sex and Money, A National Search for Human Worth. You can find out when and where to see it by going to our website at cbnnews.com. Pat?
Well, I'm pleased to report that Regent University Law School has set up a center dealing with the legal aspects of this, because we're now training lawyers to go into countries particularly, but in America as well, and to take the legal steps necessary to shut these traffickers down. If I had my way, and I don't have my way, but if I had my way, I think there would be summary executions of these traffickers. I think it's the most horrible thing they do to these young girls. And to think that you could buy a young girl, 12, 13, 14, buy her and sell her, not sell her one time for sex, but sell her as a slave to somebody else. We thought slavery was over, but this isn't. But this is demeaning. I mean, yeah, I know that there was a horrible, horrible thing done to black people during the times of slavery. But I'm not sure that they were abused sexually the way these girls are. Sometimes they have to service, 10, 20 men a night.
I think there was probably lots of abuse during slavery, but I think this is, as you say, it's an extreme scenario. You know, they say that the drug business, if you'll call it that, or trade, is very profitable, but this is even more profitable. When you sell someone a drug, the drug is taken, and this is a girl who you're paid once. This is a girl who works
over and over.
Yeah, in one
Terry,
day.
I mean, it's something that just inside you revolts against this. Yeah. And as I say, we're supposed to have gotten rid of slavery, but this is a worse form of slavery, and it's being done right under our noses, and people are so happy. Well, we're going to have Christmas. But imagine that pastor, he's on the way to a candlelight service, a Christmas Eve service, and he sees some hooker on the street or some young girl, and he pays to have sex with her.
The combination of a sexually saturated culture and the privacy of the internet in people's homes is deadly.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's something you can do about it, and what we're all going to do about it. We have to speak up. We have to let our voice be heard in this, just like people had to stand up against the slavery of Africans back in the time when slavery was legal. We need to stand up against this white slavery, which, it's not white, it's every kind of slavery, but this human trafficking. It's got to be stopped. Lee?
Washington may be broken politically, but there is hope on a spiritual front. The Congressional Prayer Caucus has crossed a major milestone. It now has 100 members. The bipartisan committee promotes prayer and fights to protect the right to pray for ordinary Americans. It started out in 2005 with a small group of lawmakers from both parties. They met weekly in a room on Capitol Hill to pray for the country. Pat, 6 years later, they continue to meet and pray.
Well, that was just an amazing story of encouragement.
Our friend Randy Forbes is at the heart of that. He was asked by President Bush, he voted for some bill he wanted. He said, "What do you want?" I said, I want a room in the Capitol I can have for a prayer.
Wow.
And that's what they gave him. He had and so now 100 members of Congress involved in the prayer caucus, and they are amazingly active and organized, and it's growing, and it can be a marvelous thing for our country.
Senate Democrats are trying to repeal the Defense of Marriage Act. That's the federal law that defines marriage as a relationship between a man and a woman. California Senator Dianne Feinstein is leading that repeal effort. The 10 Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee support it, but the prospects are less certain in the full Senate. Repealing DOMA would require the federal government to recognize gay marriage in states where it is now legal. A human rights group warns that the Egyptian military is covering up its role in the deaths of Coptic Christians. Human Rights Watch wants an independent investigation into the October 9th deaths of 27 people. Videos show Christian protesters peacefully demonstrating until police began charging them. Many of those killed were crushed by military vehicles. But of the 28 people arrested so far, none are soldiers. State media reports military rulers are working to resolve issues Christians have with the government. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.